Welcome to another episode of Prince Manufacturing Podcast, a continuous series of talks where experts discuss complex topics and processes of manufacturing, cost reduction, best practices, and related matters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prince Manufacturing Podcast. Our guest today is Mike Smith, who is the Business Development Executive here at Prince Manufacturing. Mike, would you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Merrick, for having me. I have an extensive background in manufacturing, program management, lean manufacturing. I've been helping businesses establish manufacturing presence in Mexico for about 15 years. My background in manufacturing extends over 30 years in regards to primarily aerospace, but in the last decade or so, I've had my own business and I've worked for shelter companies in the past where I've branched out into different manufacturing sectors such as medical devices, automotive, electronics, solar, and not forgetting my roots, aerospace.
Great, thanks, Mike. So today we would like to talk about shelter manufacturing in Mexico.
Sure.
I know it's a very big field, and we introduced and invited Mike to come and share his expertise with us on shelter manufacturing in Mexico. So the first question, Mike, for you to kind of explain it to us a little bit is, what are some of the facilitating operations in Mexico ways? How people can establish themselves to manufacture in Mexico? Is it a straightforward process, or do they have different options?
There's primarily 4 or 5 different ways of facilitating operations in Mexico. There's what we commonly referred to as the greenfield, which is the formation of a standalone entity in Mexico, which foreign companies have to establish. So greenfield is primarily starting off building your own building. Brownfield is using existing buildings, or either buying or leasing an existing facility, joint venture or contract manufacturing. And of course, there is the shelter program, formerly referred to as Maquiladora, as a full manufacturing service that foreign companies can use to establish a manufacturing presence in Mexico.
Sure. So just to make it clear, the greenfield, as you mentioned, is a company goes to Mexico all by themselves and then builds from scratch all by themselves, and then takes care of all the human resources, all the legal, all the immigration, in and out export areas, right? That's what greenfield implies?
Yeah, basically greenfield, or it's a standalone operation. So when a company decides that they're going to manufacture in Mexico, it's a formation of a standalone entity in Mexico. So that means you have to, you're independent. You're going as an independent into Mexico from all third parties. You're in total control of your operations from administration to execution of the manufacturing processes. Gotcha. So therefore, you must handle, all the functions in a foreign country by yourself. And that's, building, finding the building, building your team, finding the right resources. Then you get, like I said, you have that legal entity you have to go through. So it's a significant investment up front, and you're dealing with the day-to-day barriers such as culture, language, and not always understanding how to do business transactions in Mexico.
And it also sounds like you have to do a lot of diligence learning about this, or you already have to know those things.
It's a slower process for sure. I've had a lot of experience with companies who've decided to go on their own. And it's like anything else. When it's brand new, you're all excited and you go charging in head first. And a lot of companies make the mistakes. A lot of times they do have local guidance, either through economic development offices in that current state in which they decide to do business, and they provide a good service as well. But once again, the learning curve is quite long. Expect it to be expensive. Expect it to be a longer process. And the problem with with that is you've gone to Mexico for a certain purpose, and that is to manufacture. And up front, you're going to spend a lot of times, in political offices, administrative offices, and not really focusing on why you're there, and that's to manufacture.
Good point. And also, I would guess that the risk levels of doing business under such setup is quite high.
Yeah, the risks are extremely high, especially, if you're not familiar, we're all in that situation where we find ourselves in unfamiliar territory. And, we always are very cautious before we take the next step, and that draws things out. Not understanding the regulatory compliance, not understanding the legal and tax implications in Mexico, hiring and firing practices in Mexico. Just to name a few. If you're not familiar with those, you could be tied up in either litigation, long waiting lines, and like I said, the whole idea of going to Mexico is to set up manufacturing and not to be in bureaucratic lineups and processes.
Yeah, just focus on what you're good at. So the second type you mentioned, brownfield, and it seems to me that it's very similar to the greenfield, but you're just buying existing business.
Yeah,
you still have to do all the stuff by yourself.
Absolutely. The only difference is, I think I used that scenario the other day in conversation, is when it's like buying a car, either buying a new car or a used car. At the end of the day, you're still responsible for the cost of ownership and the risk that you take with associating the car. So the only difference is, you may have a building which has all the wiring in it already, all the services, all your docks, all your power transformers, all your hydraulic lines and air lines, and maybe be already in place. You may have a legal agreement or a lease in place, or a landlord who has been familiar with leasing or selling to a company before. So that may cut down time, but it does not cut down on the risk. It's still there. It's still there. It's still it's also a process, but if you're, determined to be on your own in Mexico, it is an alternative.
Absolutely. So I think the third option was joint venture or some sort of a subcontract through something, partnering with existing entity already in Mexico. What are some pitfalls of that?
There are advantages and there are some pitfalls. The advantages are, if you have a good relationship with a company that you've been doing business with for quite some time, there are a lot of companies that will open their doors and allow you to come in, and they provide some form of industrial concierge service where they provide some floor space for you, the labor. They're in usually a familiar like business. So you go in and you develop some sort of a partnership agreement that you'll have shared labor, share, accommodations, like having a roommate. And we all know what it's like having a roommate. There's days where, things don't quite go so well, and it can be quite risky. It's, once again, it's the legal entity aspect of things. It's cost sharing. It's it's a legal agreement. You have to definitely have a clear-cut, ironclad contract agreement between the person that you're going to, have that agreement with. It's signage on the door, recognizing that your company's there. It's sharing. You put your intellectual property at risk. A lot of times, the people who do the joint venture may have been a supplier. You go in there, as a higher tier, you're at risk of maybe losing some of your potentially sensitive company data per se. And once again, it's always, when you're a similar type field, when it comes to quality, when it comes to delivery, just put yourself in a position. If you're both late on a delivery and your customer's yelling at you to, make a delivery, if you're not there at the building and you're using shared resources, who do you think is going to get, the priority in order to get those parts out first? So there are some legal implications on that. From my own experience, joint ventures have never turned out great. As a risk percentage, they're probably on the lower scale. Contract manufacturing, it's different. It's different because it's like subcontracting in the U.S., Canada, or Europe, but you're using a supplier in Mexico. You have to be very familiar with that supplier. You have to do your due diligence. You have to understand their processes, their quality, and their controls, and be very tight-reined on your control processes. Is it an option short term, or it's something that if you're looking, I always look at products that, for example, they're on the maturity life cycle. And if you're trying to create capacity in your own facilities, subcontracting to a supplier in Mexico has always been a good option if you're considering going to Mexico in long term. A lot of OEMs or tier ones will require their suppliers to have a low cost strategy. Subcontracting to Mexico to a supplier down there could be one of those factors that actually helps you meet your cost competitive requirement with your customer.
Great. And then that brings us to number 4, and that's our topic of discussion today, is shelter program, shelter manufacturing program. And that leads us to second question. And tell us about how does it work, what is the risk level, and what does it involve?
Okay. Well, as I said, I've been working in supply chain for many years, and I was working for a very large tier 1 supplier in the aerospace industry. And one of my first jobs in Mexico was to build a supply base for the facilities that were being built to support their company. So my job was to help foreign companies establish a manufacturing presence to support the factories down there. And I first started off, and I was very new to this process, is doing just that, providing the 4 options and letting the companies make their own decisions. Numerous times I received phone calls after companies established and going to Mexico saying, Mike, I have no guidance. Where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? Who do I trust? Am I doing this right? And through my experience, I did have the opportunity to work with a number of shelter companies. And the services that a full shelter service offers, in my mind, was probably the most common sense approach for foreign companies looking to establish a manufacturing in Mexico. It provided, lower risk. It provided you more options, stability, and security. I know myself, if I had my own company and I was going to Mexico, I would definitely consider looking at a shelter service for sure. It allows you to remain in full ownership and control over your manufacturing processes. A lot of times your full shelter service provider is fully aware of the government support programs on taxation and accounting and legal services. They know the regulatory compliance. Some full shelter programs do offer, mostly in manufacturing communities, will offer buildings. Some companies shelter companies will help you find buildings, negotiate your lease it on your behalf, or you have the option of leasing it directly yourself. But at least you have somebody in there, with you who knows, the real estate, knows the locations, and knows the ramifications. Also, when you become under a shelter company, that shelter company becomes your legal entity in Mexico. And that's really the key, is that you don't have to set up a legal entity in Mexico on your own. You become that legal entity under your shelter provider. With that, you get their EMEX and their EVA and their OEA certifications, which allows you the ability to bring in goods and export goods into Mexico through their EMEX. Many of them, for example, Prince Manufacturing has 35 years experience in doing business in Mexico. So if I'm working with a full service provider and they have 35 years of business doing manufacturing in Mexico, and they cross the border on a daily, weekly basis, that takes a huge weight off my shoulders. Going back to previous questions about people coming in on their own, one of the biggest issues that a lot of clients always said was their Achilles heel was import-export, was understanding the paperwork, bringing goods into Mexico, manufacturing them, and exporting them back out. Under Shelter Service, the shelter company that you're under is your legal entity, and they are the importer of record into Mexico. So they import goods on your behalf and they export goods on your behalf as well. And as I mentioned earlier, all the challenges which comes with that, falls on their shoulders and lessens the risk of the manufacturer themselves. So it also reduces the learning curve of doing business in Mexico. You're up and running a whole lot faster. Hiring, the aspect, HR, I said taxation, is all handled by your manufacturing service provider or your shelter provider. So, from my point of view, any foreign company looking to establish a manufacturing presence in Mexico definitely needs to review the shelter program. There are many different shelter providers out there. Do your due diligence and see what services are offered. Get testimonial, ask who their client bases are, and like I said, do your due diligence, ask the questions.
Great, thanks, Mike. So it sounds like, to put it in a very simple terms, is if I'm a foreign company like US or Canada-based company or even European company, and I want to do business in Mexico, I could call Prince and say, I want to make my product in Mexico. And then it sounds like you guys set me up with floor space, with all the legal papers, with export, import, sure, as well as you give me people, human talent. Yep. And then all I do is just move my machinery, move my intellectual property, and then I supervise everybody. They do the work, and how do I pay Shelter for their services?
Well, you've given me a good segue there to elaborate a little bit more on what we said. With working with the Shelter Service, when companies contact Prince, most of the time the calls are directed to me. I get to know the customer, understand what their products are, why they want to come to Mexico, understand what their strategy is. Is it short term? Is it long term? What is their manufacturing product? Understanding the product, understanding their needs is very key. Nobody likes surprises, especially when you're a foreign company wanting to set up a branch of your business in a foreign country. It's like sending your firstborn off to college. You have all those worries. Do they have a safe place to stay? Will they have everything they need? Will all the amenities be there for them if they need it? Right. That's one thing about the Shelter Service is they have that. There's a huge questionnaire we go through. One of the things I strongly suggest is after we have the introductory phone call on, your interest in going to Mexico, there's a wonderful webinar, which we host that goes through about a 30-minute presentation on who we are, what we do, what services we offer. And then we also have what we call a shelter questionnaire as we go through, and we ask our clients a number of questions that will determine their needs and their cost in Mexico. How much floor space are they going to need? Building, what's the building requirements? how many people, as you said, what's the skill set requirements, and what's the frequency of import of raw materials into Mexico? What's the export timing? If they have machinery to bring into the country, we could provide assistance with that. We help them with the logistics aspect. Like I said, we do have relationships with U.S. Mexico customs, so customs regulations. We have all that services, and also all the regulatory compliances. I always ask the question, what is the needs of your manufacturing processes? Are there any environmental concerns? So we have that questionnaire we have to go through. So we understand the needs of the client. That's very, very important. We need to understand our client, your needs, your expectations, your product, your manufacturing process. Then we can start that relationship. Primarily, why are people making those phone calls? They have a cost reduction strategy that they're trying to meet. What we've seen over a number of years is Mexico being a close proximity in North America to the North American market, for Canada and in the U.S. and for foreign countries coming to North America to reduce overall lead time in regards to shipping. In the last number of years, we've seen issues with trade tariffs, customs. We've seen a lot of companies wanting to reshore from Asia, China in particular, back into U.S. and Mexico for cost competitive reasons as well. So, we need to understand that. Are you currently manufacturing somewhere else, and looking to repatriate back into North America? But these are the things that, we go through as questions to make sure that we completely understand the needs of our clients before moving ahead with the costing operations. So
Great.
that's where we are with that.
Gotcha.
Next. Okay.
So the next thing I was going to ask you about, it sounds like you already talked a lot about different advantages of operating under shelter, but what would you say are the three main advantages of operating under shelter?
Well, three. Okay, I usually, I'm a digit guy. Five. First, the advantage, it's a fast setup under a shelter. Is working with a shelter provider can help eliminate those hurdles, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're looking for a fast, quick setup in Mexico, working with a shelter service provider is probably the fastest, cleanest, most effective way to get up and running in Mexico. It radically reduces the time spent for permits, regulatory compliance, permits, and construction. Definitely, probably, the reason why I didn't put this one number one is because I don't want always to think about money, but lower cost. It's a cost competitive strategy in most cases. So people are looking for that cost competitive advantage, and it is lower cost to operate in Mexico under a shelter. It's lower cost in most cases because of the number of services which are provided under one service provider, rather having to go out and subcontract or contract your different services, import, export, HR, taxation, accounting. It's all done by your service provider. Where if you had to do that on your own, you're hiring accountants, you're hiring lawyers, you're hiring brokers. Lower cost overall. Easy management of labor. The thing is, the labor laws in Mexico are different than in Canada, U.S., and Europe. Social service requirements, number of hours, the whole labor law, import, export, just the different types of causes, different costs. You know, having a service provider there that can help you administrate those requirements, you know, in my opinion, is priceless. Managing labor in a foreign country has its challenges. So working with a service provider that has, for example, Prince, 35 years of manufacturing, you know, experience in Mexico, knows a few things or two about managing labor. And a lot of times, you know, when I say the managing labor, it's understanding the skill sets, it's understanding the culture. And that's where I've seen a lot of issues of foreign companies coming to Mexico, is not understanding the culture. So that could cause a lot of issues as well. Flexibility and scalability of working with a shelter company is huge. You can focus in on production. Scalability, you know, is a lot quicker under a shelter program because you know what your costs are, right? Like I said, 35 years experience, we know what the costs are. It's not something that you have an uncertainty and you have to forecast for. It's something that we know and we can pass on. Instant access to expertise, you know, that's priceless. You know, I'm a big person when it comes to mentor relationships, and working under a shelter company is very similar to having a mentor. Is you have someone there to ask questions all the time. You know, I know myself going down to Mexico, you know, developing my network and being able to have access to expertise and experts in certain fields has been priceless.
Yes.
So being able to have, you know, someone as a service provider that has expertise in the areas that you need for manufacturing and shipping is priceless. So those, you know, those would have to be my top 5 reasons for going to a shelter. You know, is start fast, as a fast startup, lower cost, managing your labor, you know, more flexibility and scalability, and also instant access to experts in the field.
Yeah, I like what you said about access to experts in the field and pretty much in every area of the business. So where you remain expert in your manufacturing space, but yet you rely on all the other experts that help you actually run the business. And one of the
absolutely, and that's what you want. You know what, when you know, a lot of companies will want to send an expat down to run the processes.
Yes.
Or have, you know, be their plant manager supervisor. You want that person doing what they do best, and that's implementing manufacturing processes in order to get your cost, your quality, and delivery on time to your clients. You don't want them at social services office or a legal or a lawyer's office. No. You want to focus in on what you do best, and that's manufacturing. And, you know, and leave the rest of it to your service provider. That's what you're paying their fees for. Right. So you know what? That's very, very key.
One of the potential customer that I remember when I went to Mexico and he came there to visit a facility, his motivation to explore options coming under shelter was that he was looking to retire and he had 2 sons that he wanted to continue to be successful in the business. And he thought that, you know, moving from his U.S. operations to Mexico, it would be like giving those guys a huge team of experts in how to run the business, and then they would just focus on doing the product that they were producing. So it was like, wow, that's a very interesting reason why you want to go to shelter. But it doesn't make
absolutely, sense. Absolutely. We've done the same thing, Merrick. I don't know what it's. I'm Canadian. I live here in Canada. I've had a lot of manufacturing experience, once again, in U.S. and Mexico, as some in Europe as well. Is that we've started to see a decline in skilled labor, and we've also started to see a huge decline in succession planning
Yes.
in manufacturing. As you mentioned, the acquaintance that you had this business, wants to pass it on, and things have changed. They may not, they want to leave a legacy. They want to, continue on the business. A lot of times it all comes down to cost competitiveness and technology. Having that opportunity, I've had the opportunity to work with companies that have gone to their local economic development office and said, look, I struggle to remain competitive in a global market. I need to do something. And we are afraid to pack up and move our complete business, to China or to Mexico. I started this business when I immigrated from Europe. I've raised a family here. I don't want to shut the doors. My son or daughter depends on the next generation of business, but what can I do? Many times by offering a shelter program to these companies has actually saved the business rather than putting them out. And in terms of that was that they took a look at their existing products that they've been making for years and realized that they weren't competitive in the market. So they took a certain product line and moved it to Mexico under a shelter, created capacity under their existing brick and mortar, went to their customer and said, look, we want to offer you a cost reduction to remain competitive, use the benefit of low-cost labor and the cost savings that they're going to get into Mexico, and use that to get new business from their clients. By moving out that business, they created capacity, so they were able to keep the doors open. And what they did, as their business started to grow and they established a manufacturing presence in Mexico, they were able to start feeding more mature business from their company in Canada down into Mexico. And because of their cost structure, and also their quality, they were able to generate more business with not only their existing client, but new clients.
Yes,
and so it was a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
So that's what I've seen a lot of companies do and become very successful at it. And to remain competitive in a global market was just to take a certain product line, move it to Mexico. And that's one thing that we didn't touch on, Merrick, is that when you come into Mexico under a shelter program, you're not on the hook because for owning your own building. If you decide that after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years that this isn't really working out for you, you can go home, right? You can just pack up and say, look, you know what, it's not working out for me, and you know what, we'll help you ship your equipment back to your home country, and you're not left with all these loose ends, because your shelter company is responsible for the labor. So they'll help you deal with any sort of severance that's required, the transportation, the taxation, everything that you need. Everything that company helped you do to come into the company, into the country, are also there to help you exit the company smoothly and cleanly at a lower risk. And you know what? That's a huge thing. It's a really huge thing.
That's why we can say that doing the business this way is lower risk than the other ways. And you heard Mike say that you can actually pack up your equipment and ship it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one feature is you own your equipment no matter what, and you take it back whenever you're ready.
Things don't work out, you're not stuck.
Right.
With a huge mess. Like I said, you have a friend to help you come set up. And if things don't work out, we're very empathetic. We understand that things don't work out 100% all the time for people. So you know what? We help you exit as graciously as we did to help you to enter into the country.
And I just want to quickly mention, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little more in the next podcast when we talk about manufacturing in China. But I'm sure you've heard horror stories of businesses wanting to exit China and reclaim their equipment, and that was very difficult to do, if not impossible in some cases. So you definitely don't have those horror stories with manufacturing in Mexico.
No, that's one advantage about Mexico to U.S. and Canada. It's in close proximity to both countries. We have great trading relationships with Mexico. I think the U.S. Mexico is the third largest trading partner to the U.S. Behind Canada. It's also a very large trading partner with Canada. Mexico is a large trading partner with Canada as well. And the thing is, you're not dealing with that long distance travel, and you're not dealing with a lot of language barriers. A lot of work ethic and culture is very, very similar. It just gives you that flexibility. What we're seeing now in the last year and a half is this, movement from China. You mentioned a lot of companies are just wiping their hands and walking away and leaving their stuff there. We don't see that happening. And let's face it, we are also in the middle of a pandemic, and that has definitely changed the playing field somewhat. And it will for a while still. So traveling isn't as prevalent as it used to be. Working with a shelter company such as Prince, in close proximity to the U.S. and Canada, that travel's not as necessary as I would say it would be in China. We could do a lot via Zoom and webcast. There are certain travel restrictions that we can, have lenience with. So this is something that, that still provides an option in the near future and in the future to come as well.
Excellent. Very good. So, Mike, we still have a lot of issues to talk about, but maybe what I'll propose is we will wait to answer those issues during our next session, next podcast.
Yeah.
But kind of in closing, wrap it up, I just want to, you can collect your thoughts because I will ask you to summarize it if, whatever you would like to leave the people with. But I just want to remind the people to, if anybody is interested in discovering and learning more about Prince Shelter Manufacturing, please let us know. Go to our website, princemanufacturing.com, and sign up for a webinar or fill out the contact form and mention there that you would like to receive a personalized webinar. And that's basically means you and whoever from your organization and us, it will be Mike, myself, and a couple of other experts from Prince Manufacturing. We set up a Zoom call, something like what we're doing right now, and then we'll go through a lot more detail about us, about Prince Manufacturing, as well as about making you successful in Mexico. We also will share with you some of the success stories of our clients. So that's kind of I'd like to invite you guys to do. So Mike, from my end, I would just ask you to, give us the last few final words, and we will wrap it up this episode.
Okay. Well, Eric, thanks for having me. This is a subject I'm very passionate about. I've had, a number of years experience doing this and helping companies set up manufacturing in Mexico. Do your due diligence, ask the questions, make sure that there's no such thing as a silly question. We will continue to have these podcasts. We will find different subjects that our potential clients are asking us to touch on. I will talk in next episodes, a little bit more about hiring and firing practices. We'll talk about taxation. We'll talk about import, export, whatever concerns or questions that we're seeing, post to us via our website. But I look forward to our next podcast, and looking forward to hearing from any companies out there that are interested in setting up a manufacturing presence in Mexico via shelter or subcontract manufacturing. I think what we'll do next podcast, America, is we'll elaborate a little bit more on one of the unique service offerings that Prince has, which is a form of a hybrid shelter service, which is a manufacturing/shelter program. So I'll save those details for our next podcast and look forward to our next chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And just to let people know, the way they can contact Michael is go to the website princemanufacturing.com and then go to contact page, fill out your information, and in the note, make a note that you would like to get in touch with Michael Smith, and we'll connect you with him for a direct communication. Thanks, Mike, again so much for your expertise and what you have shared on Prince Manufacturing Shelter Services in Mexico.
Okay, thanks for having me, Merrick.
Thank you for listening. Sign up to receive Prince Manufacturing content through our newsletter and social media. If you wish to discuss your manufacturing needs, our experts are available for a complimentary consultation. Visit princemanufacturing.com.